Hello, I am Eluca Atali, an Azerbaijani writer. I have written works in the genres of short stories, novels, plays, and philosophical literary miniatures. In total, 49 of my books have been published so far and have been translated into various languages. Today, I will present to you my latest novel, the book In the Prison of Iran's Hezbollah. The book was published last year in Azerbaijani by Kanun Publishing House, and in Turkey it was published in 2 volumes in a broader format by Çınaraltı Publishing House. There are 4 books within the novel. Yes, the first is The Trauma of the Revolution, the second is 3 Promises, 3 Demands, the third is The Bloody Orchestra, and the fourth is Those Who Seek Life in a Coffin. So I worked on the novel for 12 years. Why did it take such a long time? Because I spent a long time communicating with women who had spent years in various Iranian prisons under more than 100 death sentences, conducting interviews with them. With some we met at their homes, with others we met in cafes, and to some I addressed more than 50 questions and received answers. But not everyone who had been in prison wanted to share their memories. Some said that talking about it made them relive those days, and for that reason they hesitated to give interviews. Journalists, quite rightly, would ask me questions. If you met with people who were under death sentences, then how is it that they weren't executed? Yes, that's a fair question. The reason they weren't executed is that these women were imprisoned at a very young age. As you know, according to international law and human rights laws, if a person under the age of 18 is imprisoned, if they are considered a criminal, of course, if you can call someone who doesn't believe in the Islamic Revolution a criminal, they are protected by international law, and as a result, they were released from prison at a very young age. The death sentences were lifted from them. So I can only answer journalists' questions in this way. The events cover the period from 1978, that is the tense time when the revolution took place, up to the period of mass executions in Iran in 1988, spanning 10 years. Geographically, the significant events of the narrative take place in the vibrant city of Paris, the historic Turkish city of Urmia, and the deeply religious and spiritual center city of Qom. As I mentioned, it consists of 4 books. Each book has its own uniqueness. Although it discusses almost separate issues, I have tried to reveal the main theme here, that the revolution devours its own children. The first book of the novel, The Trauma of the Revolution, tells about the life of Fatma at the age of 10. Her teacher, Rıza Shukru Afshar, recommends that she read Samad Behrangi's The Little Black Fish, and after the girl finishes reading the book, her teacher is executed, marking the beginning of the child's first trauma from the revolution. And Fatma buys a black fish and keeps it in an aquarium. The book, The Trauma of the Revolution, ends with 17-year-old Fatma being arrested at the Mother Tongue Association. The second book is called 3 Promises, 3 Demands. In this book, Khomeini is in Paris in 1978. He is sitting in Paris, but corresponding with the White House. The book presents 3 letters that the White House wrote to Khomeini. Here, I would like to read an idea given on the back cover of the book. A moment ago, Imam Khomeini greedily sniffed the letter brought by Warren Zimmerman and shouted that the White House's Plan B smelled of Turks. He cried out. He wrote, he inspired the religious leader. Only the cool autumn air of Paris filled his lungs. He did not realize that, like Khomeini, to sense the smell of the letter, you needed to be a politician, not a doctor. By fulfilling his, that is, Khomeini's, demands, the White House was enabling the victory of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. As a direct result, in the book this one profound sentence that I have given more or less vividly shows the complete outcome of the entire revolution. Iran, which was pregnant with the Islamic Revolution for 15 years from America's donor sperm, of course, a 15-year pregnancy was not such a long period for a revolution. When the intense labor pains were finally and completely over, and the revered Imam at last landed at Tehran's bustling airport, he still did not have the profound happiness of truly greeting the bright sun in this vibrant city. The third significant book in this series is The Bloody Arikistir. Thus, the novel's protagonist Fatma's harrowing prison life in the women's prison in Urmia, which held 480 inmates, is depicted as a place where torture and mass executions took place. In this part, it is possible to learn about the fate of hundreds of people who were imprisoned for their national and free-thinking views, as well as those who were slandered and thrown into prison. In the prison, Wednesdays and Sundays of the week are designated as special days for mass executions. Immediately after the morning call to prayer, the names of the prisoners who will be executed that evening are read out by the Zainab Guards, that is, the Special Revolutionary Guards of Seba, specifically the female guards. After the noon call to prayer, the girls are immediately subjected to temporary marriage, and their virginity is taken by pastors and mullahs. Because according to religious belief, those who die as virgins go to heaven. Imam Khomeini, however, says to the condemned, "We cannot grant paradise to those who stand against the Islamic Revolution." I will read a sentence that was on the cover of the book. This is from an interview with a woman who spent a long time in prison under a death sentence. The moment the first call to morning prayer, which is a call to holiness and humanity, sounded, it was as if a time bomb exploded inside the prison. People living under a death sentence experienced extremely high levels of stress. Some would even lose consciousness. In other words, this is a sentence that generalizes that event. Prisons. What happens inside the prison? 12 and 15-year-old girls being raped and killed, or rather executed, 3 pregnant women being executed in a single night, 2 mothers with infants being stoned to death. These are just some of the things that happen. The fourth book is called Those Who Seek Life in a Coffin. At the center here is the mutated revolutionary section. It is a letter from Khomeini's successor, Ayatollah Montazeri, addressed to the supreme religious leader about the mistakes of the revolution. The letter explicitly notes that presenting you as the true author of this significant revolution is indeed a considerable mistake on the part of the Sharia authorities, or perhaps Reza Shah, or even America. The letter is interpreted under these 3 questions. Another part of the book is called The Trojan Horse. It is about the Ayatollah's plan for Baku and his encounter with Lenin in Baku's Freedom Square. In their communist fanatic dialogue, there is an ideological struggle for establishing themselves in northern Azerbaijan, and I should note that in Baku, the M Theatre and the people's artist Vidade Hasanov staged this as a psychological performance. It was also successfully performed. At the end, there is a scene of Fatma's execution, and her father receives a call from prison saying, "Congratulations, your daughter has washed away her sin with her own blood." Through the devastated figure of Allah Karim, the story vividly depicts the suffering endured by the fathers of executed daughters. That is, the anguish of the parents is extensively portrayed in this narrative. The father who asks for his daughter's body is mocked and insulted by the prison warden. It is explained that infidels do not have the right to be buried like normal people. So at night, those who are executed are buried in mass graves at Khava-e-Miyana, on the outskirts of the city. That is, they are buried without shrouds or any formalities, according to Islamic custom. And strangely, in this situation, the prison warden gives money to Allah Karim, the father of Fatma, the executed girl. This money is the payment for the temporary marriage, sige, of his daughter. It is also referred to as head money or even mother's milk money. So what happens as a result? The imam, or rather the devout Allah Karim, is given his daughter's clothes that she wore in prison, her diaries, and a portrait of a girl. This portrait was made by the girls in prison as a memento to leave behind. Some pulled threads from the clothes they wore, others cut their hair and used it to weave the portrait. Of course, these are given to him secretly by a prison worker. And Allah Karim returns home. The call to noon prayer is heard, but for the first time he remains indifferent to it and does not pray. It seems that the regime has not only stolen his daughter, but also his faith. Under the sound of the call to prayer, he takes the fish from the aquarium and heads toward the sea. The composition of the work is entirely based on Samad Berangi's tale, The Little Black Fish, and after the climax, to find out what happens to those little black fish, it is essential to read the novel. And also in this work, for the first time, I was able to systematically reveal the essence of communism through artistic means of depiction. Thank you for your attention.